Good morning. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. Here's another demonstration of both the genius of Rabbi Yosef Rimon, who I have quoted to you many times before, and the sensitivity and emotion and spirituality he brings to every question that is posed to him, and this happens hundreds of times a day. And of course, this past year, many more from chayalim, from soldiers who are serving, who he visits often and who often turn to him for their questions about Jewish law. So he tells the following story. He says, I was visiting soldiers in Gaza, and a soldier came up to me. I could tell that he was very weak and very tired, very worn out soldier. And he told me that he had spent 10 days straight in a tank without leaving the tank. So we need to understand the conditions in a tank in battle. It's hard for us to imagine unless we've experienced it. So here you have 10 days. You have a group of people, men and also women, now serve in tanks. They're in a very confined space. There's very little room to move. If they're not leaving the tank, that means that they're in danger. They're in a very dangerous place. So there's adrenaline, there's emotion, there's action, and of course, there are the normal bodily functions that are taking place when a group of people who are in close quarters, who are not bathing and they're not going anywhere else, and they're not leaving this tank. I'm not going to go into detail, but I think you could imagine. Let's just say it's not like the fresh air when you take a walk on the top of Mount Royal. I'll just put it like that. So this soldier approached Rabbi Rimon after 10 days in these circumstances, and he asked the following question. He said, is it permissible for me to pray inside the tank? I can't leave the tank for safety. Inside the tank, there are smells. It can get a little unpleasant. Not a little. And we have a general principle in Jewish law that if a person is in the presence of something that has a bad odor, or in the presence of, let's say, garbage of some type, a person is not allowed to pray. A person has to move away from that. But here you can't move away. So the soldier says, what should I do? Now, anyone who is somewhat knowledgeable about Jewish law knows the answer to this question. It's actually not a difficult question. And Rabbi Rimon tells the story that it happens that just after he got this question, he was on a trip to America to deliver classes. He travels all over. Just a couple of weeks ago, he was here in Montreal. He travels all over to give lectures and to teach and to encourage and inspire, which he certainly did when he was here in Montreal. If you were there that night, you know what I mean. So he happened to mention to someone who is knowledgeable about Jewish law that he had received this question, and the other person said, well, that's a pretty simple question in terms of Jewish law, because this person is in a situation where he is involved in a mitzvah, the mitzvah of protecting the Jewish people. We have a principle in Jewish law, osek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. under certain circumstances, if you were involved in performing one mitzvah, and because you are performing that mitzvah, you are not able to perform another mitzvah, you're exempt from that other mitzvah. Let's say, for example, on Sukkos. So when we eat, we're supposed to be in a sukkah. Let's say a person has to travel to a place that has no sukkah on Sukkos, and it's for a mitzvah. Let's say it's to help someone, to visit someone who is sick, let's say, and there's no sukkah. So we apply this principle. Osek b'mitzvah, you're involved in the mitzvah of visiting this person who is sick, who needs to be visited, which is certainly a mitzvah, and therefore you're exempt from another positive mitzvah. So you just eat your meals outside of the sukkah. So this man in New York said to him, he said, it's clear, you just tell him that if to leave the tank to be able to daven is a threat to life, sakanas nefashos, obviously he's not going to do that. What he is doing in the tank is a mitzvah. Osek b'mitzvah, patur b'nei mitzvah. Tell him he's exempt from davening. That's the conventional, correct answer. But that is not what Rabbi Rimon said. Listen carefully to what Rabbi Rimon said. Rabbi Rimon said, Me'olam lo pana elai chayal b'vakasha she'eftar oto mitfilah. It has never happened. Just remember, Rabbi Rimon is answering hundreds of questions every day from soldiers in battle, and he's been doing this for years. Me'olam, it never happened that a soldier came to ask me, could I be exempt from prayer? For whatever reason, whatever the situation, whatever the question was, it never happened. Lehepech, on the opposite, Chayalim rotzim lihispalel. Soldiers want to pray to Hashem, especially when they're in battle. Chayalim rotzim kesher nosaf umiyuchad im HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chayalim, soldiers, need a special connection to God when they are in those circumstances. And Rabbi Rimon adds, Gam chayalim she'en datiim chibshu darachim laharbot betfila ubekiyim mitzvos b'mitziyatu. Even soldiers that in the rest of their lives they are not religious, they're not observant, but under these circumstances they want to pray, they want to perform mitzvos. We know this from all over, putting on tzitzis, putting on tefillin, davening, praying. They need this. They're not looking to be exempt. So now, Rav Rimon uses his expertise to find a way. And again, expertise in Jewish law means to know all of the different opinions. The opinions that are normative, the opinions that are more stringent than normative, the opinions that are less stringent than normative. You have to know it all, because under certain circumstances, we do make use of minority opinions. So Rabbi Rimon says he answered to this soldier as follows. He said, if you are in a tank and you cannot leave the tank, and inside the tank there are things that have a bad smell, what happens, of course, is, again, without going into details, it goes into a receptacle that's closed, and it's kept inside until they can get out and empty everything out. In that case, when the refuse is contained in a container, so it doesn't smell so much, and therefore it's permissible to pray, because there is refuse there, but it's contained, and since it's contained, the smell is not so bad, and it's permissible to pray. That's number one. And even if there is a little bit of smell from that or from all the other stuff that's going on, maybe there is room to be lenient to say that if a person is in a place where there is a constant smell. You know, if you're in a situation, if you live in a place that is not so clean, and you stay there for a while, you know, you get used to it. I mean, you can all give your own examples to yourselves, but I think you understand what I mean. A person gets used to it. And if a person is in that situation, nebuch, a person, let's say, who is sick, or a person, let's say, in a home for the aged sometimes. So the person who is there, they after a while, they don't notice it. A visitor who comes in, they may be very sensitive, and they, you know, they notice it it's very offensive to them. But if you're there all the time, you start not to notice it. So Rabbi Rimon says, if it's there all the time, and the people who are in the tank are used to it, then that too should make it that it's permissible still to pray. Because the idea is, if there is something that is an unusually bad odor, it will interrupt with your concentration in prayer. But if it's something that you're used to, it's there all the time, so it's there all the time. So it should not interrupt your concentration in prayer, so it should be permitted. So it should be permissible. So what Rabbi Rimon is doing is looking for these, in quotation marks, leniencies, and you have to be a real genius in halakha, not just to know the normative laws, but to know all of the different opinions, even the minority views. So Rabbi Rimon is able to find a lenient view, which in this case, of course, is not being used to make the situation easier for someone, but on the contrary, to obligate the person in terms of davening, in terms of prayer. That's the answer that he gave. And this is such an important lesson, not just for chayalim, not just for soldiers in battle, but for all of us. Even when we are technically exempt from a certain mitzvah for whatever reason, depending on the situation, we may still need that mitzvah. We may still need that connection to Hashem in that moment, in that way. And this is also a very deep statement about Tzva HaHagana Yisrael, the IDF, the Israel Defense Force. I never had a soldier come to me to ask if they could be exempted from prayer. Because soldiers, Israeli soldiers, want to pray, need to pray, even if they may not do so in the rest of their lives. They want to pray and they need to pray. That should, number one, inform us of the greatness of the heroism of the men and women of the IDF. And it should also inspire all of us here in our prayer and our connection to God, especially when we are praying for the safety and security of the members of the IDF. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.